Welcome to the Saseo Stream channel. Today's movie is the drama, The Banker. Don't be fooled by this worn-out hat. Beneath this hat lies a high-level young man. This young black man named Bernard is a shoe shiner who chose to set up his stand in front of the bank intentionally, as it's filled with wealthy white customers. He doesn't care about the little money, because by shining shoes slowly, he works while always trying to listen to the financial secrets in the conversations of white people. As soon as they leave the boy, he quickly jots down in a notebook everything he considers valuable, all the financial knowledge he heard from them. The film is set in Texas in 1939, a place where blacks are oppressed by severe discriminations. His father tells him with sadness that his dream is impossible, but Bernard's eyes show determination against all odds. 15 years later, now an adult, he moves to Los Angeles with his family, his wife Eunice and his son. The racial discrimination here isn't as serious as in his old home. From this point on, he decides to start his business here. Bernard, a dreamer, promises his wife that they will move soon, as in the new city, they are living in a pantry in one of their relatives' homes. In the new city, he starts as a real estate broker and looks for houses for sale all over the city. Through observation, he sees an opportunity when he discovers that the black community in Los Angeles is overcrowded, while the white community still has many vacant houses. The black community needs rental properties, making this situation a great opportunity. After some time, he comes across a white-owned apartment. He goes up to the owner and says, "You've only rented out half of the apartment, so why not sell it to me? I'll give you $30,000 now and an additional $5,000 when I rent out all the rooms." Although the owner admires his idea, he doesn't want to engage in risky deals. Bernard expresses his understanding, but before leaving, he suddenly looks at the owner's calendar, which was given by a local bank manager. In that moment, he bids farewell to the owner and heads straight to the bank, where he meets the manager who sent the calendar. The manager's secretary, who discriminates against black people, refuses to introduce him to the manager. So, he waits for a few hours at the bank's door, and when the manager comes out, he stops him immediately, pretending to be the landowner, and says that he's one of his VIP clients and wishes to discuss a business proposition that would benefit him. That same night, he receives a call from the owner. The owner asks if Bernard used his name to try to obtain a loan. Bernard has no choice but to apologize. The owner doesn't blame him, but admires his belief that he won't give up until he achieves his goal. And now, based on this sentiment, the owner decides to guarantee the loan for him. An elderly white lady has just returned home after doing her shopping when she sees a black man at her doorstep and asks, "What are you doing?" The black man calmly replies that he's renovating the apartment buildings. The old lady says with a spiteful look, "Workers like you should be careful." Bernard responds to her not to worry because the apartment is his. Without saying a word, the elderly lady goes back inside her house and angrily calls the police shortly after. When the police arrive, Bernard quickly retrieves a copy of the property certificate. After examining it, the police confirm that the house indeed belongs to him. On the same night, Bernard returns to the apartment building. The elderly lady at the door sees him and immediately tells him to leave because it's not the time for moving. Bernard, remaining calm, replies that he's not a worker now but the owner. The elderly lady is left astounded, and a few days later, she moves out in anger. Over time, the building gets filled up, and Bernard proceeds by negotiating payments with the former owner, who greatly admires him and offers to start a business venture together with Bernard. Now, Bernard takes charge of selecting the properties and calculating the rents, while the former owner handles the transactions and signs the contracts because banks wouldn't realize they're dealing with black individuals. The cooperation between the two goes very smoothly. Bernard takes advantage of the situation and moves from an apartment to a mansion, providing a happy life for his family. However, life doesn't always go smoothly, and challenges can arise at any moment. The former owner who works with Bernard is old and frail, and he suddenly passes away a few years later. His assets in the company are inherited by his wife, who harbors severe discrimination against blacks and becomes unwilling to cooperate with Bernard's cooperative relationship with the former owner. So he thinks about the bank manager, but the manager has already cooperated with the widow and avoids Bernard once again. Now, extremely disappointed, he gets up from the bench and looks around at the clean and tidy bank building. He notices systematically discriminatory practices everywhere, solely based on the color of his skin. He underscores how often he's looked down upon when he enters the bank. There are 4 banks in a single building, and each one has closed its doors to black men. At this moment, Bernard's mind gives birth to a brilliant idea: to buy the bank and see who among them will dare to discriminate against him again. So Bernard meets Joe, another successful black real estate developer in Los Angeles, and shares his plans with him. At first, Joe thinks Bernard is out of his mind and ends up lying because the building's land price is extremely high, and no black person has ever bought land in the downtown area. However, after discussing this for a while, Joe realizes that Bernard isn't a delusional man but a thoughtful rationalist. Bernard wants to buy the building so that once he owns it, the bank inside will serve him. They won't dare to refuse him a loan, and they'll also promote the property. Joe is taken aback by his idea, but after contemplating it, he believes it won't work. Despite being extremely wealthy, he's still subject to white individuals everywhere. He might be able to step on white bankers or white-owned land, but he still can't directly negotiate transactions with white people. This is where they need a white person as an intermediary. After some thought, Bernard has an idea in mind: Matt, who has been helping him with renovations. This guy is an honest man, and he's also very ambitious, just a little inexperienced. So Bernard and Joe began to train Matt, providing him with comprehensive golf lessons, high-level mathematical thinking, and real estate knowledge. Matt lived up to their expectations and quickly became a professional golfer. He was able to play golf proficiently and calculate real estate valuations, showcasing the skills of a promising young entrepreneur. At a golf club, Matt meets the owner of a bank building, in a meeting planned by Joe. The conversation goes well, and Matt is given the chance to buy the building, with the rest to be negotiated. Before the negotiation, Bernard helps Matt make all the preparations. He starts by counting the number of lights on in the building after dark, then calculates the building's vacancy rate. Next, he derives the estimated construction value using the building's annual revenue and operating costs. Bernard compiles any numbers that might be involved and instructs Matt to memorize these figures before the meeting with the owner. During the negotiation, Matt is consistently one step ahead and provides the exact numbers that shock both the boss and the accountant next to him. They all believe they've encountered a math genius and can't deceive him. In the end, Bernard ends up with the building that initially costs over $2.4 million for just $1.56 million. From then on, every time Bernard enters or exits the building, the bank's president will come over and shake his hand. The small manager who had made things difficult for him at the beginning of the movie is left perplexed by the banking sector's support. As a result, Bernard and Joe's real estate careers begin to rapidly expand. Several years later, Bernard and Joe are released from prison, but Eunice finds it peculiar that the two men appear happy. It turns out that they have properties and assets in the Bahamas. Eunice is incredulous and asks Bernard how this came about. As it happens, Matt called Bernard the night before his testimony and informed him about the deal with the senator. In exchange, Bernard asked Matt for a favor. Before their assets could be confiscated, the film ends. Afterward, we learn that Bernard and Joe's residential properties played a crucial role in the fight against housing segregation in Los Angeles. They still possess 2 mansions, side by side, in the Bahamas. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe and leave your like. The next day, Bernard visits Joe and tells him that they should buy the Continental Bank in Texas. Joe initially considers it a crazy idea, given the severe racism in Texas, but Bernard manages to convince him and provides reasons for the purchase. With that, Joe agrees to assist Bernard. They recruit Matt once again and use him as their frontman. They meet with the bank's owners, Robert Florence Sr. and Robert Jr., to discuss the deal's numbers. Despite Florence's suspicions, the banker sells the bank to Matt and his partners. With the acquisition of the Continental Bank, Bernard starts working and begins to help African Americans in the town. It becomes evident that Bernard's goal is to aid his fellow people in having a fair shot at housing and even financial success. Junior Florence begins to investigate the loans that his bank had been approving and threatens them with a letter from the United States Department of the Treasury. The department will conduct an inspection of the bank's operations within a month. During this period, Matt puts forward a suggestion proposing that they purchase another bank and transfer the problematic loans to it. The next day, Matt meets with a lawyer and begins signing loan contracts. Some time later, Matt receives a call from Florence Jr. about clients who want to withdraw all their money from Continental Bank. To make matters worse, a federal bank examiner arrives to inspect the loans. To assist, Bernard reluctantly dresses up as a janitor so he can get closer during the meeting. Unfortunately, it doesn't make a difference as the examiner uncovers a critical issue with several loans. Bernard can't believe the absurdity of the loans that were approved and eventually learns that it was Florence Jr. all along. As he rushes to gather all the bank protocols, Matt remembers that he hired a lawyer recommended by Florence, and that's how Florence got wind of the problematic loans and did everything to undermine them. Bernard and Joe tell Matt that they believe the most rational move is to distance themselves from the bank. Unwilling to let go of his bank, Matt takes an action without informing his partners. On the day Joe discovers what he has done, he rushes to the bank to confront Matt about the loans. Meanwhile, Florence watches the spectacle unfold. Bernard tells Matt to gather his reports, but it's too late. The federal bank investigators have already arrived to revoke the bank's operating license. As they exit the building, the FBI arrests Bernard and Joe. Some time later, Bernard and Joe meet with their lawyer and learn that their case has been tied up with some racial politics in the country. Meanwhile, Matt talks to a senator about testifying against his partners in exchange for his freedom. Matt follows Meet Lien's suggestions and testifies against his partners at the Senate hearing. Later, Bernard also meets with the senator and hears his proposal, which gives him a choice: accept a deal of immunity and confirm Matt's testimonies, or face potential imprisonment if Bernard chooses to speak his mind. In the end, Bernard speaks the words that were kept in his heart. Shortly thereafter, the fortunes of Bernard and Joe are devastated, and both are sentenced to prison. Junior Florence buys the Continental Bank. However, Matt is never accused of any crime. Several years later, Bernard and Joe are released from prison, but Eunice finds it peculiar that the two men appear happy. It turns out that they have properties and assets in the Bahamas. Eunice is incredulous and asks Bernard how this came about. As it happens, Matt called Bernard the night before his testimony and informed him about the deal with the senator. In exchange, Bernard asked Matt for a favor. Before their assets could be confiscated, the film ends. Afterward, we learn that Bernard and Joe's residential properties played a crucial role in the fight against housing segregation in Los Angeles. They still possess 2 mansions, side by side, in the Bahamas. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe and leave your like.